Y'all, Chicago is my city, my home, my first love. You know, I love all 234 square miles, the 3 million people, the 77 neighborhoods, and hundreds of little blocks. But we all know what happens. A lot of us barely leave our own neighborhood, if at all. So it turns out the Chicago we think we know, the one that I grew up with, was just one piece of a much bigger picture that is beautiful, complicated, and always changing. To really appreciate this city, to know its people, and learn who we are, we have to venture out, explore, take a journey out of your comfort zone, and see, smell, taste, hear, feel what others are doing every day. And check it out. There are dozens of the coolest museums, cultural institutions, and centers just waiting to welcome us and invite us into their Chicago and share in their stories. So let's hit the streets. What's up? I'm Jacoby Cochran with CityCast Chicago, and today I'm on the north side of the city looking at some of the members of Chicago Cultural Alliance. I hope you join me for a fantastic set of tours, y'all.
Hi there, how are you? Good, how are you?
I'm not complaining.
Good, welcome to the Swedish American Museum.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Can you tell me a little bit about this museum? When was it built?
So the building goes back to 1927, about, and the museum has been here since 1988. We started in 76 across the street in a little storefront. We're continuing to expand.
Give me a little bit of the Swedish American story. You know, we always say Chicago is diverse. What does that look like for this community?
For the Swedish American community, they started coming here around the 1850s, 1860s. There were actually a million Swedes that left Sweden between 1850 and 1930. And I think 1902, Chicago was the second largest city as far as Swedish citizens were concerned.
Oh, now this neighborhood is known as Little Sweden for many people.
Yeah.
They didn't start in Andersonville, though.
No, so they started more downtown, actually around Merchandise Mart, Lakeview, and even in Chinatown.
Okay.
But then they started migrating north up here. The name Andersonville didn't come about until 55, 60 years ago. So it was the Swedish area for a long time. And I love the fact that we're such a diverse community today. If you go up and down the street, I mean, you see everything. And there's a little bit of Sweden left in here. And obviously our part is to keep that bigger Sweden going.
I hear you.
So about 20 years ago, we opened the Children's Museum. And children don't they don't go in and say, well, why is this Swedish? I'm not Swedish. It's more, oh, this is something that I can experience. First they live in Sweden, in the little stuga in here, then they buy a ticket, then they take a little trip. So it's a great way for the school's children to learn about immigration, because they get the sort of traditional way through the exhibit on the second floor, and then they can come up here and really experiencing it. So we time travel them back to 1850, 1870, something like that, and say, okay, what are you going to take with you if you can only fit it in this little trunk?
Right.
And that, I think, is the beauty here, that there are no buttons to push. It's all their own imagination.
Yeah. I think it's obvious that the museum serves people who are Swedish American, but I think what's important about Chicago is learning about cultures that are nothing like the one you grew up in. Thank you so much for showing me this. Again, I never have taken a trip here as a kid, and I didn't realize how interactive it was just in learning about it over the last couple of days. So I really appreciate you walking me through it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Of course.
Come back.
Let's head out of the city to the northern suburbs and check out the Korean Cultural Center of Chicago.
It is quite a unique opportunity for us to introduce our Joseon collection in the museum in Korean Cultural Center of Chicago. Those are the paintings by folk artists It's even in naive art in the Western countries they call, but in Korea, those are folk art, not the appointed by palace or by the king, but those have been very popular for late Joseon Dynasty's period until 19th centuries. And it's a beautiful. Usually, they represent the harmony and nature together, and then peace. So that's one part of it. Usually, the paintings here made some of those nature. They put nature and human lives in harmony together instead of separating it, landscape alone or that lives of people or portrait. Those that always that nature, there's people inside here. This is the only place that was funded by the efforts of private citizens, Korean Americans in this area. That's why most of these collections that we have is not from Korean government, but it was funded and purchased and donated by private citizens. We are very proud, and our mission is to disseminate Korean culture to mainstream America. So this is the mission to go forward instead of staying just as is. And that's how our missions and people associated with this cultural center is driven to thrive, so that we will have a much better collection. And I'm so happy and proud that people from CCA visited us and view us as one of the MOSAIC part, which is always I claim that we harmonize together just as a part of brilliant color and nature to make it all through harmony.
I'm not complaining. How you feeling today?
Good. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
I'm excited to be here. Carlos, I've never been to the Haitian American Museum. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, definitely. So the Haitian American Museum of Chicago, or HAMOC, H-A-M-O-C like we like to call it, we're a less than 500 square feet storefront style museum located here in the Uptown community. Yeah. And that's so important because Uptown is such a diverse neighborhood. It's really, really important to have a platform and a place for Haitian Americans here, not only in the city, but we're really a epicenter for Haitian and Haitian Americans in the Midwest.
Let's step back. Tell me a little bit about this space. You know, Chicago is famous for its storefront museums. In fact, the way I met Peter Vega from the Alliance, we were talking about saving the ability to build these type museums. How long has this space been here?
Yeah, we were founded in 2012 by Elsie Hector Hernandez, born in Haiti, moved to the United States, and has lived in Chicago for a good part of her life. But she really had the dream of creating a space that talks about Haitian and Haitian Americans in a different sense. You know, lots of people know about the earthquake. Lots of people know about the hurricane. Lots of people know that it's a very poor country. But we're here, and Elsie wanted to show people and teach people, educate people, that there's so much more to the Haitian and, you know, Haiti itself than those three things.
Yeah, I love to look around inside.
Yeah. And our most important piece, which you see right as you walk in, is of Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable. You know, Chicagoans, born and raised, don't know who he is. Yeah. So I think, again, it's super important to have him front and center right at the beginning. Let's talk about him. You know, let's learn a little bit about not only Haitian history, but Chicago history, because it really goes hand in hand.
I'd imagine most of the people that come through here are not Haitian American. How are you all continuing to get that message out there, especially in a city like Chicago? It's important for you to learn beyond yourself, to learn more about the people in the neighborhoods, the cultures that make up this city. You know, how do you all continue to inspire and motivate people to come here, you know, to learn about a culture that, you know, might be very different from their own?
And I'm glad you mentioned it too. Like our community and the people that come here aren't all Haitian or Haitian American, but that really talks to, again, the core of our reasoning of being here is to help change the narrative. And by doing that, you do have to look at different communities who have those negative perspectives to help change those perspectives as much as you can. Haiti actually was split into two, the North and the South, at one point during the Haitian Revolution. And so there was lots of kind of controversy in how the whole island was going to continue on. You know, the Spanish had it, the French had it, then the Haitians had it, but it was so separated they didn't know how to run a country. And, you know, eventually it came down to just one person.
They kind of jump out to you because, I mean, not only does it have a regal feel to it, right? You got your sort of classic portraits, but, you know, the Black Haitians. So to see them dressed sort of in this regal position as they claim their country's independence is pretty powerful. Again, thank you so much for walking through the space, showing it off. It punches so much above its weight class.
I'm glad you're here to see the space. It looks like lots of things are really like calling you, like as you're looking around. I think that's something that's super important to me. It's just, you know, people seeing themselves represented in art, and, you know, people seeing issues and topics in art that, you know, really resonate with them. So that's why we're here.
What's up? Next up, we're on the west side of the city, looking at some of the members of the Chicago Cultural Alliance. Come along with me.
I'm great. How are you? It's great to see you.
Good to
Welcome
see you too.
to the museum. Come on in.
That basically looks like the first chapter of a public speaking class.
It does, yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
Today we're going to talk about civic duty, we're going to talk about truth.
I like the Isocrates quote the best, I think. And if a man should partake of our culture, let him be called a Hellene. Maybe I like that because I'm not actually Greek, so I'm just like, it's okay that I work here, and that's fine. But yeah, so I like this little wall. We usually host events in the museum, which is actually probably my favorite thing, is when we actually have something going on in the space and we get to have people come into space and do something we've been working on. But we've also been doing a lot of lecture series or videos and interviews with Greek American authors and things like that lately, or scholars who are doing interesting work in the field, where we just jump on a Zoom call and do an interview on our YouTube channel. But it's exciting to have people now engage with us regularly who don't live in Chicago, who never would have before. So having all of these things and then figuring out how to hybridize these other events that we already do so we can have some kind of online component to them as well. It's a whole host of new exciting challenges that we're going to be doing here soon that I think will be really interesting.
I'm really excited to be here.
Good. I'm glad you're here.
I've never been to the National Hellenic Museum.
Fantastic.
And I don't know much about Greeks in Chicago, the migration.
Really, when Greeks came here, they were kind of a late arrival for European immigrant groups. They came here closer to like the late 20th century, and they really built their community around Jane Addams' Hull House, which is just south of the museum here on the UIC campus.
Okay.
And so that was really like the community place, the meeting point where they could all get together, and then basically their community built out from that. Businesses came about around that building. And so by the 1930s, that whole area that we now know as UIC, that was what was called the Greek Delta. And then when they ended up having to move because of this, the urban renewal programs that were happening, and all of those folks really got displaced, some of the Greeks that could, they moved up north to where we are now, along Halsted Street, but many ended up moving out to the suburbs.
Okay.
And that's something that continues to this day. The one thing that I would say is being displaced is some of the businesses that have moved out. The big one being the Parthenon restaurant, which is where flaming saganaki was invented. And that's one of the things that we really like to highlight here at the museum. Remember these places, and we do so with one of these things right here. I pulled this photo out because this is one of my favorite photos.
I love that you just like put the gloves on. Like, before I even knew that it was sitting there, I already knew you were about to touch something extremely important.
And even though some of the restaurants have gone away, we still got a lot of restaurants in the neighborhood and a lot of businesses.
I was gonna say, this is still Greek town, so how is that alive and well in the surrounding neighborhood?
Basically, all those restaurants line the street. We've got Athena and Greek Islands for your traditional Greek fare, Nine Muses Cafe, our Topless Cafe, which really helps you feel like you're out on a Greek street, just hanging out, having a nice cup of coffee, that kind of thing. I'm not Greek myself, so like for me, I've got kind of an outsider's perspective here, which has been really cool because I've learned so much about this community, just being a part of the museum.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's been beautiful about this project is that for many of the places that we're going, some of the people who work there and a lot of the people who are visiting are not, Swedish or Chinese American or Greek American, but these establishments and institutions are so important about keeping that culture alive, but also passing that information along to other individuals.
And that's super important, I think, especially for like small cultural museums, and because not everybody has a lot of resources that they can pour into these things, but that doesn't mean you can't share those stories.
Hey, how you doing today?
Hi, Jacoby, how are you?
I can't complain.
So, welcome. So this is the Ukrainian Insitute of Modern Art. The Institute was established by some financial supporters, community members, but also artists who had been really doing kind of pop-up exhibits in the neighborhood for about a decade, even more. A little west, about a block west of us.
Chicago and its apartment museums.
Right,
Like,
right.
We
Absolutely.
really do that, unlike a lot of
Absolutely.
places.
Oh yeah, definitely. Right now we have an exhibit of, it's called Abstraction as Metaphor. The work is by Corey Pastiglione and Kathy Shaw.
I love that title. I mean, the pieces are fantastic. They're very colorful. They draw you right in. It's not just Ukrainian American artists or Ukrainian-born artists that present.
No, not at all. Really what happened was, although initially it was focused on artists of Ukrainian descent, and that really stemmed from the political situation Ukraine was in up until the Cold War ended. And also the politics in the former Soviet Union, which prohibited this kind of work actually to be produced officially. This kind of work would have had to be produced in secret or very private circles, at some risk to artists if it became too publicly known. But to make this kind of work, which is about freedom and autonomy, was dangerous to a number of them. And so the founders were, a big impetus for them also was thinking about their country that, that their parents and grandparents were born in, and felt that they could develop or support the pathway of more freedom in art and creativity by having an institution like this in a democracy.
Yeah.
And so it was a very important institution. That's actually why the permanent collection developed, so that there would be a permanent home for a lot of these, for this kind of work.
Yeah. So the history of this museum, how does it factor into the history of Westtown and the other modern art that's in the neighborhood?
Well, at the time the Institute was established, there was no modern art here or contemporary art. And actually the exhibition group that established it was very much focused on the importance of bringing new art and kind of changing art into a neighborhood that wouldn't leave its neighborhood to go see that art. So for Westtown, this was really novel because it came so far west. And for those persons that lived here, couldn't get downtown, didn't have time to take the bus or couldn't afford to pay for parking, you could come here and you could look at art that was being done, within the last year or so, maybe 2 years. And that was relevant to current conversations about what modern and contemporary art were.
Thank you so much for showing me around today. This exhibit was extremely beautiful. And I'm gonna come back once the permanent pieces are back up.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Seriously though, what's going on? How are you all doing today?
Bravo Proxima. We welcome you to the Ukrainian National Museum of Chicago with our Ukrainian tradition of welcoming our guests with bread and salt. Bread is because Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe, and it signifies wealth, and salt, purity.
Oh my God. So does everybody get this or just me?
Just today.
All of our
Just
honorary
today.
guests. Yes.
I appreciate that.
Welcome to our museum. Our museum was founded by three displaced scholars, three Ukrainian immigrants, who had initially a very big dream, big and attainable, and their dream was to preserve and share Ukrainian history and heritage, of course, and culture, and share it with their new home, Chicago.
What are some of the things you love about this museum since you've been working here?
For me, the biggest inspiration is the community. And the thing is that the museum is the direct reflection of community, of each and everyone who takes part, whether as a volunteer or donating their time, their ideas, their creativity, donating to our collections. So over the years, for almost 69 years, we evolved, and today it's really significant place for all of us.
Welcome to our Ukrainian National Museum, and the history of our museum is very rich, and you can find a lot of information on the internet, but especially in this house, you will feel that you like in Ukraine.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about the story? How far does the Ukrainian story go in Chicago?
Ukraine's in Chicago history has more than 100 years. More than 100 years ago, and especially in 1892, we have the first immigrant from Ukraine who came to the United States, and first settlement was in the south side of Chicago.
The art of Ukrainian pisanka making started in pagan times, so way before Christianity in Ukraine. In pagan times, different colors and symbols definitely had its own meaning, and with adopting Christianity, pagan and Christian symbols merged together, and today we have this beautiful, one of the two biggest staples of Ukrainian folk art. It's embroidery and Easter egg. So it can be as a gift to your loved ones, and it would serve as a sort of totem. It would have like protective properties, and whatever symbol you include in it, it's what you wish to your loved ones. So it's either strong health, fertility, luck, and all of those good things. So it's not just a pretty souvenir, it is a combination of rich Ukrainian history over time. So that's what we call pisanka.
This year's Ukraine will celebrate the 30th anniversary of Ukrainian independence. And first time from United States, 4 museums are going to Ukraine to participate in the huge exhibit dedicated to the Ukrainian independence, but including the museum in diaspora. That means that we preserve the history of Ukraine. And we always said that Ukraine is everywhere where Ukrainians live.
Get out of here now. You mind telling me a little bit about the history of this building? I imagine this is not traditional Puerto Rican architecture.
It's not at all. You have some Danish in it, you have some Victorian in it, you have some German style in it. But it was built in 1895 as horse stables. And back then, this was kind of the outskirts of Chicago. So this was the last stop people made before they went on their long journeys. But we all knew it as kind of the scary, haunted place when we were growing up here as kids. And so we played fast pitching off of this building. But we decided as a community that we wanted to restore it into a museum.
Do you have any plans for the building moving forward?
Well, we do. We are actually creating this year. We're creating a new separate building for our archives and collections. So we're going to be doing this in our garden area here in the back part of our garden. We're going to be putting up a 3,000 square foot building that basically is going to do with collections and archiving. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to be using the lawn more as an entertainment center. So we want to be able to cater to everybody, and so that people don't have to travel as far. They could come here and enjoy the same type of music that they could
It
somewhere
looks
else.
really inviting as a community space. It's both a museum, but also a gathering space, like you said, for people to come in here and learn, but also to celebrate culture, celebrate personal accolades and events.
Yes. My wife and I had spent 15 years restoring this location into a museum. It cost us like $10 million to make it happen because it was on the National Historical Registry. And although there wasn't much here, they wanted it all restored back to its original form. So we ended up spending years to get that done. But in 2014, we finally got it done. And that's when we became the National Puerto Rican Museum.
That's beautiful. You mind walking me around
Sure,
and show me some of the exhibits that are in here?
Let's see. So Puerto Ricans are made of Spaniards, they're made of Taino Indians, and they're made of African. So it's 1/3 of each one of them. This exhibit marries those three cultures, and that's how we become Puerto Ricans, known as Puerto Ricans. So this is one of the spiritual beings that came out of that African part of the diaspora of the Puerto Rican community. And so this one being basically talks about how do we branch out, how do we reach out, and how do we become part of everybody's community.
You know, for many people, when they hear Puerto Rico, maybe they're talking to conversations of aid or fights for statehood. How do you all stay connected with like ongoing, movements in the mainland?
So you can't just be a museum. It's got to be about, especially with what happened this last year, it's got to be not only about taking care of the community, but it also has to be about Black Lives Matter. How does that impact a whole nation? And what's our role in that? We all have to play a role. And so you can't just be a museum. It's got to be more of something that's living, something that's going on, and it's being part of contributing. So we have more than just a museum here. It's about community discussions, it's about action, it's about being an activist, it's about speaking out.
We're here on the south side of the city, my side of the city. Come along with me.
Hey, hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Welcome to our museum.
I'm excited to be here. I've never actually come into the Chinese American Museum.
Our museum, even though it's a small museum, but you will find a lot of interesting things to see, to watch, and even to buy. A little gift shop.
How long has this museum been here?
The museum opens in 2005.
Can you tell me a little bit about how this museum interacts with the neighborhood around it?
Well, our mission is to preserve, actually is to advance the appreciation of Chinese American culture, especially in the Midwest. We aim to preserve and educate the public about the Chinese American culture. And we got a lot of donations from the members in the community. So we tell stories. We use the donation from our community to educate back the younger generation in our community.
Zuma, how are you doing today?
Oh, fine, thank you. Nice to see you,
Can you
Jacoby.
tell me a little bit about this exhibit we're standing in right now? I'm seeing Era of Opulence, Chinese Fine Dining. Tell me, what does that mean?
That means the finest dining of Chinese cuisine. This happened at the turn of the century in the United States. Before, it was all just chop suey joints and small places like that. But then this is very elegant. It's very upscale, and we didn't even know these type of restaurants existed by the Chinese immigrants.
Oh, wow.
These were usually located downtown, never in the Chinatown area, because in those days people did not trust Chinatown.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, that view of Chinatown has changed. I have grown up knowing it as a hub for restaurants, but over the last year, there's been a rise in anti-Asian sentiment, xenophobia, racism. How is this neighborhood persevering?
Well, even before COVID hit here in the United States, people were shunning Chinatown already. So they start suffering at the beginning in January, where Chinatown became a ghost town. So many of the businesses suffered. But the other good sign is there were a few that opened too.
So it says, bet you didn't know. What didn't I know, Sulan?
Well, as we were talking earlier about anti-Chinese and Asian sentiments, I bet you didn't know that it's been going on for more than a century. If you take a look at this letter that was written by the Chinese Sixth Company to the chief of police in San Francisco, asking for protection in the year of 1876. So this is like nothing new to us, to the minorities, people of color. Yeah.
But just like we can talk about exclusion being a part of the history, there's also been moments of solidarity where restaurants would have jazz musicians who might not be able to play in white-only clubs.
Case in point here, we have Louis Armstrong. Until the day he died, he really loved Chinese food. So he came up with this song, Cornet Chop Suey, that he performed all over the place. And then there's Margaret Johnson. She sang, who'll chop your suey when I'm gone? So it shows you how prevalent the Chinese cuisine of chop suey is, how it's embedded in the American culture, you know, as part of society, and everybody knows about chop suey.
Next up is the Balzekas Museum of Lithuanian Culture here in West Lawn. I'm pretty sure I've driven right past this place a few times and didn't even know it. Let's see what's happening.
Welcome everybody to the Balzekas Museum.
We're very happy that we're in Chicago, and we're also really happy that we're on the southwest side because we are one of the few cultural institutions in this location. So it's really great to see people coming to this spot from all over the city.
I think way at the beginning, the founding, art and culture were very, very important. Because the Lithuanian people were so artistic and crafty, everybody wanted to get together. I have this stamp collection, I have these photographs. And that's how initially it started. The paintings, it was the art and cultural that really started the museum.
And I would add that one of the founding precepts, and this is what I wanted to highlight philosophically, was the idea that you cannot learn about your own culture without experiencing another culture. So that was always a big priority. And that's why we're very proud members of the Cultural Alliance. The fact that you need to share and discover and learn about other communities, other people, to really understand how you differ, how you're the same. And more often than not, you're the same.
The idea of the museum is Lithuanian. But if you take a look at our books, our literature, it's American Lithuanian. We had such a strong background of Lithuania, but all the people that were interested were of American descent.
Lithuanians have been settling in Chicago since the middle half of the previous to last century, 19th century, and they came to work often in hard physical labor jobs in the stockyards, in the coal mines, in steel mills, and consequently they sought some sort of an escape from the hardship of their daily life. When we reopened, we had someone come to the museum insisting that she come. It was her 90th birthday and she wanted to come to see her mother. She had come here before and spotted her mother, the woman facing us directly here with the purse in the front of her hands. The woman had turned 90, she wanted to come and see her, and it was really moving for the staff. She walked up and she was, stroking her mother's face. And since then, there have been several other people. These were teachers, apparently. They were in Germany after the war, and they were going to, it seems to be teachers meeting somewhere. So Lithuanian teachers were traveling maybe to a different displaced persons camp for some kind of meetings, but they were waiting expectantly for a train, and that picture was taken. But people react to it for some reason, maybe because they're life-size figures. This is a country that has, at different times in history, been either occupied or subsumed into Russia and the Soviet Union. And thankfully, we've now experienced a period of independence, and the country has really been allowed to flourish. But the initial purpose of establishing the museum was to make sure that Lithuania wasn't forgotten, because it had really literally been removed from most world maps.
What's up, boss?
What's going on?
How you feeling today?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I mean, to step off the train into Boxville, Bronzeville, USA.
You are here.
Tell me a little bit about this place, please.
So yeah, Boxville Shipping Container Marketplace, right? Very creative. So what we're doing, we're finding affordable, engaging ways to get entrepreneurs a leg up into their industry. So getting a platform where you can take your idea, your business you're starting, and with a little bit lower risk, help to remove some of those barriers, and you got your own storefront now.
All right, so one of the members here in Boxville is also a member of the Cultural Alliance here in the city, and that's the Bronzeville Historical Society. You mind taking me to their box?
Yeah, it's right over here. Come on, let's go.
I have been a lover of history probably unintentionally at first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grandmothers, they will tell you these stories that impact your life.
Mm-hmm.
And my first story was about a Civil War soldier in my family, which I thought, oh, they don't know anything, they're just making that up, right? And then when, what was it, Roots came out in 1978, it changed a lot of people's ideas about recording their oral histories. And so that's when I really got intentional about writing everything down.
Wow. You know, we've been talking to a few other museums, and we talk about the immigrant story, the migration story.
Yeah.
But the migration story for Black folks it's different, you know? It's
challenging,
different.
very challenging. And that's why I chose this family here, the Great Migration family, to be the symbol for our organization. They have living relatives still here in Chicago. I said that here's an example of what so many people's challenge was to get here.
Mm-hmm. So how do we get to Boxville, Bronzeville, Chicago, Illinois, USA, North America? You know, what has that story been like? Because it doesn't sound like you were trained in archival work or trained to open a historical society. It was just something that you felt you had to do.
There were a number of people who wanted to put some energy in it. And my working at the post office on 46 in Cottage Grove, I met face-to-face and delivered face-to-face mail to people that folks wish they could meet.
Wow.
So, you know, taking mail to Farrakhan, Jesse Jackson, Carol Moseley Brown, you know, seeing it. Even when Barack Obama, you know, he would come into the post office and people like, go out there and ask him something, you know, because everybody
he gonna be somebody. He gonna be somebody.
And that was the whole idea. They were like, the footprint of the community came into the post office, and so I got a chance to interview people.
This is so organic for you.
So folks gave me their stories, and I used them to put in this compilation. And I wanted those who were alive and well and of course could contribute their own narrative to tell me what they wanted to say about themselves.
Yeah. You mind showing me around inside of here?
So there are a number of ladies and gentlemen in the community that have been artisans and they decided that best to sell their items from this space. Smell this.
You need to put these in the silver room.
Smell that.
Oh.
I know.
You go ahead and bag this one up for me?
Yeah, I got you.
You've been watching, you've been archiving the history, the transformation of Bronzeville. What do you want to see for this neighborhood over the next 10 years, 15 years, 40 years?
The first thing for this community to have a real connectedness to its history and to expanding its work, we would have to have an infrastructure that reflects that. So the internet is so needed.
And that digital divide has been exacerbated over the last year. Infrastructure, accessibility, community, and communication.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
gotta happen.
Well, Sherry, thank you so much. Watching the Bronzeville Historical Society continue to transform, to move from in your home, around the community, to into Boxville, it's been fantastic to
My
watch.
house is still junky, trust me. There's stuff everywhere, so.
Trust me, if somebody tells you they know the city of Chicago, they probably don't. Over the last couple of days, I've learned more about this city than I ever had. And whether you grew up in Rogers Park or Humboldt Park, if you want to get a slice of Korean culture or Lithuanian culture, you will find that across the city of Chicago. Yeah, I grew up on the south side, but traveling to the west side, the north side, and even taking a dip in the lake on the east side has taught me that this city is a mosaic. It is not just one thing, but depending on what block you're on or community you're in, you'll get a completely different Chicago. So I challenge you, regardless of where you grew up, where you call home, step outside your neighborhood. Whether you go across town or up the street, I promise you, you'll learn something new, something different, another reason why we are the best place in the world, if you ask me. I love Chicago, and I hope that you'll learn just a little bit more about this place we all call home. Peace.